Hello! Roman military commanders and soldiers alike were fearsome warriors. They contributed to the formation of a vast empire, but victory has not always been the case. This is our second video on Rome's greatest defeats. The link to our first video is going to pop up now on a card at the upper right hand corner of your screen. At the end, you will find the link to a playlist containing all videos. Before continuing, do not forget to subscribe to Random History. New interesting videos are coming up. Rome's Greatest Defeats Part 2. Next on Random History. During the 3rd century BC, Rome has faced formidable foes on its own territory. First, it was the ambitious Pyrrhus, king of Epirus in 280 BC, who reached the gates of the city. A card with a link to our video on Pyrrhus is going to pop up on the upper right-hand corner of your screen now. The other scourge of Rome was Hannibal. He was a Carthaginian general and statesman, widely regarded as one of the greatest military commanders in history. Carthage was a city-state rivaling Rome in the Mediterranean. The two empires fought 3 wars between them between 264 and 146 BC, known as the Punic Wars. At the end of the third and final Punic War, Carthage fell after a long siege. The once mighty city was sacked, its population was slaughtered, and all buildings were demolished. But this is a story for another time. Hannibal, after the legendary crossing of the Alps in 218 BC, has gained a strong foothold in the lands of the Roman Republic. The Romans promptly sent their legions to face him. Rome was twice defeated at Trebia and Lake Tasimene. Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, a member of the prominent Fabia family, was given dictatorial powers. He was tasked with dealing with Hannibal. Fabius respected and feared the Carthaginians' military skill. He opted to avoid facing him in a pitched battle. Attrition warfare and attacking the enemy's supply lines was chosen instead. The proud Romans, however, deemed that these tactics were beneath them. They had a mighty army, so they saw no need to hide as cowards. Thus, Fabius's dictatorial powers were not renewed. In the elections of 216 BC, 2 new consuls were elected, Gaius Trentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus. A consul held the highest elected political office of the Roman Republic. They were elected on a year basis. Romans named the years after the consuls. That is another indication of their importance. This custom held into the 6th century AD, when the BC and AD calendar was invented. Find out more on the subject by clicking on the link that is going to pop up on a card at the upper right hand corner of your screen now. Anyway, back to the invasion of the Roman lands. The Romans, in order to face Hannibal, have raised a massive army of 86,000 Roman and allied troops. Ordinarily, each of the 2 consuls would command his own portion of the army, but the decision was made for the 2 armies to unite into one. Roman law dictated that in that case the command of the troops was to alternate between the 2 consuls daily. These 2 men came from a radically different background. Varro came from the low plebeian class and was the son of a butcher. Paulus, on the other hand, was an aristocrat on his 2nd consulship. During his 1st consulship, 3 years before, Paulus was victorious in the 2nd Illyrian War. He was in that case awarded a triumph. It was spring of 216 BC. Hannibal, the energetic leader that he was, took the initiative. He seized a large supply depot at the city of Cannae. Cannae, modern-day Canne de Battaglia, was a rather obscure town of the Apulian plain in the south of the Italian peninsula. Hannibal's taking hold of the city caused distress within the Roman ranks since they were cut off from their crucial sources of supplies. The consuls, smarting for confrontation, set out to locate the Carthaginian army. Scouts tracked the bulk of Hannibal's army camped on the left bank of the river Aufidus. The legions encamped about 8 kilometers, that's about 5 miles, away from the enemy. The way historians tend to describe the two consuls should be taken with a grain of salt. Varro did not have the political allies and family ties of Paulus, so given the disastrous result of the battle, the latter was described by contemporary historians as the more prudent of the two. Varro was depicted as rather reckless. He may have been made a scapegoat by the aristocratic establishment. In any case, Paulus was supposedly opposed in engaging Hannibal on open ground, notwithstanding the Romans' numerical advantage. Sources are not very clear on the figures for troops involved in the battle. It seems that the Carthaginian army numbered somewhere between 40 and 50,000 troops, where the Carthaginians outclassed the Romans was in the quality of their horsemen. This was the factor that worried Paulus. Apparently, Hannibal was aware of the disagreement between the two Roman leaders. Having set up his plan based on confronting the Roman legions head-on, he opted in waiting to make his move on the third day. Then, Varro would have had the leadership. On the morning of August 2nd, the two armies were deployed, ready for battle. Conventional military thinking at the time dictated that infantry was to be placed at the center. Horsemen were to occupy the wings, covering the flanks. The Romans in Cannae, under the leadership of Varro, were deployed in a conventional way. The depth of the lines was favored instead of the width. By positioning his troops in such a way, Varro hoped to swiftly break through the center of Hannibal's lines. Even though the Romans outnumbered their opponents, the lines of the two armies had a front of approximately the same length. Hannibal placed his horsemen on the flanks, confident that they would overpower their Roman opponents. The left flank of the Carthaginians was protected by the river Aufidus. Furthermore, the Carthaginians had maneuvered in such a way so that the Romans would face east. Thus, the morning sun would shine into the Romans' eyes, partially blinding them. Their vision would be further hampered by the southeasterly winds blowing sand and dust into their faces. The way Hannibal positioned his troops was proof of his perception of the terrain. It was to be instrumental in his victory against the battle-hardened Romans. Hannibal was in the command of the center of his lines. As the Carthaginians marched against the Romans, their general gradually extended the center of his line. Simultaneously, their flanks gradually fell off. Thus, a crescent was formed, curving towards the Romans. The Carthaginian flanks kept the pace of the center, but were arranged diagonally. This is called an echelon formation. The battle began with the engagement of the opposing horsemen. Their struggle was brutal. Hannibal's horsemen rapidly got the upper hand and the Roman opponents were cut down without mercy. In the meantime, the masses of infantry on both sides marched against each other. Units of light infantry were the first to engage in non-decisive skirmishes. The casualties inflicted were negligible and those infantrymen finally withdrew behind the ranks of their heavy infantry. The lines of heavy infantry finally clashed. The noise must have been overwhelming for the combatants. Roman legions had the additional disadvantage of having the sun in their eyes. Dust was also blowing in their eyes, as Hannibal anticipated, further blocking their vision and adding to their distress. The center of the Carthaginian line, displaying admirable discipline under the guidance of their leader, gradually retreated. This retreat was masterly executed and the cohesion of the front was not broken. Hannibal's trap sprang. while the Roman front ranks were advancing, the bulk of the troops started to lose their cohesion. The Carthaginians gradually started to create a semicircle around the attacking Romans. The Roman ranks slowly formed a wedge that drove deeper into the Carthaginian semicircle. Roman legionaries were compacted together so closely that were unable to wield their weapons. Hannibal's horsemen now attacked the Roman rear. The Romans were massacred. According to the account given by the Greek historian Polybius, 70,000 of the Roman allied infantry were killed, 10,000 were captured, not more than 3,000 survived. From the original 6,000 Roman horsemen, only 370 got away with their lives. Paulus was among the dead. Varro, on the other hand, survived the battle. Hannibal's losses were far inferior. Historians report figures between 5,700 and 8,000 men. Within less than 2 years, Rome had lost 1/5 of its entire population of male citizens over 17 years of age. That was 150,000 men. As one would expect, the situation in Rome was desperate. There have even been reports of human sacrifice. Hannibal opted not to attack the city because he seemingly deemed that his troops were ill-prepared for a long siege. The Senate and the people turned to Fabius for guidance once more. His war of attrition seemed now more palatable. He who was nicknamed the Cunctator, which translates as the delayer, was now considered as wise as a god. Under his guidance, the so-called Fabian strategy of avoiding facing Hannibal in open battle was systematically implemented. Now the Romans opted for smaller engagements and attacks on the Carthaginian supply lines. Guerrilla warfare and scorched earth tactics were largely applied. The relentless Romans finally managed to drive Hannibal out of the Italian peninsula in 204 BC. They succeeded in bringing the war on Carthaginian soil. There Hannibal was finally beaten by Publius Scipio at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. And this was our second video on crushing Roman defeats. More videos on this subject are on the way. You do not want to miss them. So subscribe to Random History. Stick around for a few more seconds because a couple of videos are going to pop up that will interest you. If you feel so inclined, please like, share and comment in order to trigger the YouTube algorithm. Until the next time, keep learning!